I found in my life that my purpose was directly tied to the way in which I was wounded the most. I grew up in a broken home, and my father, when they went through a divorce and he essentially left the family, I was probably around 5 years old. But I still always wanted to know who my dad was. And so, because I felt unseen, I would go to these extreme lengths just to be seen. Well, you don't see me, so I'm going to lash out. I'm going to get in trouble at school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. My stepmom, she had a gun. She had this huge 357 Magnum. Correction officer comes to my cell. He says, "Hey, man, I got some bad news for you. Last night, your brother was stabbed to death." And so,
You're in prison and you actually got out really, really early. Tell us how that happened and then what you did afterwards.
I was strategically planning on how to kill this guy when I got out. I heard this voice when I was in that cell, and it was like, "That will do nothing to honor your brother's memory." I'm talking to this therapist, and he's like, "Man, you've got an inner child in you that's still in there, bro. The fact that you exist alone is a mathematical miracle that you're even here."
Welcome to the Tomorrow is Not Today podcast. I am so excited about today. I've got a friend of mine who we've been friends for, I think, 26, 27 years, something like that, Patrick.
Man, has it been that long?
It has been. It has been. It's a long, long time. And I cannot wait to get your story out for people to hear your story because I know it's going to have a big impact on people. And that's exactly what we're wanting to do. We want to help people go from I'm living a life to I'm living with passion and purpose and making a difference for people's lives, leave a legacy that can be proud of. You're definitely doing that. So, Patrick, just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, that sort of thing before we get into it.
Well, I would say first, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, got 4 kids, and I'm an artist, I'm a pastor, I'm an entrepreneur, a little bit of everything. It depends on the. I live in the States, of course, but I love Australia. Been there many times. I'm definitely ready to come back. But yeah, I do all kinds of different stuff here in the States. We've started some businesses, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point, to kind of help people get on their feet after they made some dumb decisions. But yeah, I live in Ohio, southwestern Ohio, in a city called Hamilton. It's in between Cincinnati and Dayton. If you're ever in America, Ohio is like they call it the heartbeat of America. So if you look at the landmass, it's like up to the right. And but yeah, it's home, man. And yeah, it's an honor to be here. Yeah, this is long overdue, so I'm excited to be here.
It is long overdue. It definitely is. And we've been trying to do this because there's some other projects we're looking at doing together as well. This is going to be the first part of those. The others they're in the works. I can tell you, you're probably going, man, when are you actually going to get on and do that? They are in the works at the moment, along with this. But I want you to take us back for now, Patrick. Before we met, take us back to your childhood, what that was like, because I think that's going to give people a very good idea of how you got where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say about that, but I would say first, I grew up in a broken home. I grew up, there was 5 of us children, and my father, when I was probably around 5 years old, he was unfaithful to my mom, and they went through a divorce, and he essentially left the family, and we were living in Colorado, in Denver at the time, and so my mom had family back in Cleveland. And so she packed 5 kids into one of those old station wagons with the wood paneling siding, and he just being an adult now, like, I got a new respect for, like, what she must have went through as a single mom, bro, like,
Mm,
so she
yeah,
packed
totally.
these 5 kids, in this car and drove back to the only home that she knew. But because of that decision and because of the absence of a father, which unfortunately, this is the story of a lot of inner city children, that can immediately thrust you into abject poverty. And so we went from being somewhat okay financially to, living in housing projects and growing up, there was never enough, right? And so, yeah, there's so much that comes with that. As a child, especially as a young man, you wanna know what is your origin story, who did I come from, who is my dad? You struggle with that, and as you get older, you struggle with that even more. And, I just remember growing up, like, not really having a sense of identity and not knowing who I was. And, on top of it, I'm the middle child, so you know what I mean? Like, the oldest, they know who they
Yep.
are. The baby thinks they're the king, right? But us middle children, like, we don't have a clue, right? And
Who are
so
you? Where'd you come from?
yeah, yeah. And so, I will say my mom always said I was the one pregnancy that was planned, so so maybe there's some to my existence. But yeah, man, I grew up, in that environment, and you know, it was in the inner city of Cleveland. You're seeing drugs, you're seeing addiction, you're seeing poverty, violence, gang activity, and the longer you're in that environment, and I think this is true for any environment, the longer you're in a negative, dysfunctional environment, the more it becomes normal, right? And so what happens
Mhm.
is over time you get desensitized to it. I'm sure there's somebody watching this right now. You've been in an abusive relationship, and you put up with that longer than you should have. And you told yourself all these things, it's not really bad as I think it is. Maybe it's not really as bad as everyone else says. And then finally the voice of reason, somebody comes in from the outside and says, "Hey, this isn't normal," right? And so, yeah, I grew up around that stuff, and but I still always wanted to know who my dad was, and so my father was still living in Colorado at that point. Probably when I was in about fourth grade. My oldest brother, Chris, he had already moved back to Colorado. He wanted to know his dad. He hated the inner city of Cleveland and wanted to get out, and so he flew back there and was living with my dad for a couple of years. Then my older brother Larry, who we're all 2 years apart, he went after Chris, and then, it just seemed like, it's the rite of passage, we all go to Colorado at a certain age. And so, my father was living in the city called Wheat Ridge, which, coming from the environment that we came from, the inner city of Cleveland and Wheat Ridge, Colorado are like, they are such polar opposites culturally, food wise, socioeconomic statuses of people, interests, just everything. It was a foreign landscape. And so, I eventually convinced my mom to let me go out there. I'm happy to be with my two older brothers, even though my two younger siblings are still in Cleveland. And I had this idea and this picture in my mind what my dad was going to be like. He's going to be this great guy. He's going to play catch with me with a baseball outside. We're going to hang out. He's going to take me fishing. He's going to teach me about girls. Just all the stuff that you think of when you think of a male, role model. And so I ended up getting out there, and I found out, like, my brothers were being abused, they were being beat up, and he was a raging alcoholic. There was, different women coming in every other night of the week, and just like everything that we thought it would be, it was the opposite, right? And so I remember one time my oldest brother was unloading a dishwasher, and him and my dad are arguing. My dad's a big guy. He's 6'4". At the time, he's like probably 260, 270 pounds. I'm not sure what that is in kilos, Aussies, but he's a big guy. He's a big guy. And him and my brother's probably 14 at the time. And they start arguing, and my dad pulls out a plate out of the dishwasher, smacks him in the mouth with it, splits his mouth open, knocks his teeth out, and tells him that, I'll take you to the hospital, but if you tell him who did it, I'll do it again, right? And so that was like my orientation of moving out to Colorado. But at the same time, it's like, okay, Colorado is beautiful. The sun shines out here, unlike Ohio. There's some cute girls I met, and I was there was part of me I wanted to get away from the environment too, but it just the abuse, the chaos, the alcoholism, my dad's drug stuff. It just got to be it got to be so chaotic that I couldn't take it, anymore. So I started lashing out. I felt unseen. And so, the only time that he was interacting with us was yelling at us, arguing with us, violence, that kind of stuff. And so, and I want to say this, and I think anybody can relate to this. There's people that have never gone through abuse, never gone through hard stuff, in terms of family dynamic that can relate to this. And I remember, like, more than anything, I grew up feeling unseen. And I heard somebody say one time, "Man, it makes me really sad when I think about the length that I went to just justify my own existence," right? And so because I felt unseen, I would go to these extreme lengths just to be seen. Well, you don't see me, so I'm going to lash out. I'm going to get in trouble at school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And really, it was a cry for help, but nobody was listening, unfortunately, on that side. And, my dad had remarried and, she was very abusive as well. I mean, there's so many stories I could say, but I remember at one point, the violence had gotten so bad that my stepmom, she had a gun. She had this huge 357 Magnum, in the house. And I remember I found the gun and I hid the gun and I hid it in the basement. And so they're freaking out. They can't find the gun. And I'll be honest, I was a bad kid. I was a bad kid. I was always getting in trouble, but there was a root to it, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they needed to come right to me. They didn't come to Larry or Chris, like, hey, Pat, where's the gun? And I was probably 10 at the time. And I remember looking at my stepmom and saying, I do have your gun. I took your gun. And if you ever touch me or my brothers again, I'm going to shoot you in your sleep. Now, this sounds shocking to hear, I'm sure. And when I said it, I wasn't trying to be some tough guy or some gangster. Like, honestly, I was just a scared kid. And there was so much abuse and
Mm.
chaos going on. Like, I felt like I
How
was
old were you at this stage?
probably 10 years old, 10 years old.
Wow. Wow.
And so thankfully I had a couple friends down the street. Shout out to Aaron and Chris Lucas, lived down the street from me. And we grew up together and I would run down to their house and hang out down there until things kind of subsided at my house and then go back. And it just got to be so crazy, man. And then finally, I went back to Cleveland because I just couldn't take it anymore. It was that horrible. And and so I go back to where my role models are drug dealers, gangsters, criminals, thieves. And I go back to that environment even more angry, even more confused about who I am, feeling even more alone. And so I very quickly jumped into that lifestyle, that street lifestyle. And so, I tell people this all the time. My wife and I, we do work inside the prisons. I've done stuff inside prisons in Brisbane, Sydney, in the UK, all over the world, mainly here in America, but we've done tons of prison work here in Ohio. And out of all the years of doing that, like the men and women that are incarcerated, like a lot of them, not every single one, but a lot of them, the real root reason of why they're there and why they've done what they've done is they have some unresolved trauma or chaos as children that they never dealt with. And so I'm not
Mm.
saying that that's a free pass. Like, there's a lot of people that have gone through abuse that don't break the law and don't hurt people. Like, this isn't a free pass. But for me, that was a big part of why I was so angry and why I was lashing out. And so feel free to cut me off at any moment. So I moved back to,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, hearing that story, because most people, like, we hear somewhere, somehow, that apparently that stuff happens, or we watch TV and you can see movies and all that sort of thing. But it's actually talking with somebody who's lived that life, been there, it puts it on a completely different level. And when you think of how you grew up, what you grew up with, and what you are doing now to help people, like going into prisons all around the world and doing all that sort of thing, to help people is a phenomenal thing. And that's part of what I want people to hear, is that no matter who you are, where you are, what's gone on or going on, you can actually make a very, very positive difference to the life of other people. And you've dedicated your life to doing that now, which is awesome. What what was it, the catalyst for you that took you from, because we'll get back into more of your
yeah,
story as we go on, but what was the catalyst for you that changed you, I guess?
it was tragedy. It was tragedy on that road, which, if you want, I can jump into that. So eventually,
Yeah, yeah. Let's
I
go
come
there.
I come back to Ohio. I'm more angry. 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. I'm getting in fights in school. I start getting high. I start drinking alcohol. I start stealing cars. I'm doing robberies. I mean, it's just one thing after another. And, and without getting all into all the war stories, when I was 16, I was arrested for 5 counts of kidnapping and aggravated robbery with a gun. I was also charged with a home invasion, so I forced myself in somebody's house with a gun. I got involved in selling narcotics at 15, 16 years old, and I owed this supplier thousands and thousands of dollars. My drugs, I couldn't find them. I always joke with people like that's a question I have for God on that day is like, I don't want them back, but like I know you took the drugs, like But that was it was a turning point for me. Like things had to get bad, they had to get hard, the walls had to close, and the floor had to drop out. And so here I am, they arrest me, and here in the States, if even if you're a juvenile, you're 16 years old, you get arrested for 5 felony 1s, there's a level system here in the States where, felony 5 is the lowest, least serious, and then obviously misdemeanors are that. But I had 5 felony 1s, which is like the worst. And I was facing 45 years in prison, a minimum charge of 45 years in prison. And so they lock me up, they arrest me. There was no way they could say, I could say, "Oh, you got the wrong guy." They caught me on the scene, and while I'm waiting to go to court, a correction officer comes to my cell. He says, "Hey, man, I got some bad news for you. Last night your brother was stabbed to death." And so, because of the childhood trauma and the stuff and the struggle that we went through as children, like me and my siblings are very, very close. And like at the time, they didn't know which sibling it was. I eventually found out which brother it was. But my brother, his name was Larry. He was the opposite of me. He had never been in trouble. He was a star athlete and never been arrested. And he went to a club downtown Cleveland, was hanging out with some friends, and this guy picks a fight with him and stabs him 8 times. And so he bleeds to death while I'm sitting in the detention center. My best friend, he was
Wow.
16 at the time. His name is Joe. He was also with my brother. The same guy stabbed my best friend and stabbed him in the heart, and he died on the scene. They brought him back, but he's blind and paralyzed to this day from that same incident. And then the guy who killed him never did a day. He never did a day in prison, right? And so I'm sure that there's somebody watching this that life has given you you've been dealt a horrible hand. Like you've had horrible stuff happen. Maybe that business relationship fell apart. Maybe your marriage fell apart. Whatever your thing is, where like that injustice happened and you were wronged. Like it's really hard to recover from. And I remember that, like when all that stuff happened with my brother, they had to go to court, and so my mom's going to court. She has to look at the guy who killed her son, and because his family spent close to $1 million on a lawyer, they were connected politically. He walked away scot-free, didn't do a day in jail. They gave him the
Wow.
night in court that he killed my brother with in front of my mom, okay? And then I
Is
find out,
kidding.
oh, man, like, you didn't know all these you knew the story, but you didn't know all these details, like and then
No,
about
no.
the same guy who did it, he eventually becomes a police officer, right? And so, like, here I am. I know why I'm in prison. Like, I robbed somebody. You know what I mean? It's not a shock
Yes.
that I'm sitting in this cell. Like, I never felt like, oh God, why me? No, I know exactly why me. Uh, right? But the injustice of that situation, like God, why am I still alive and he's dead? Right? And so and then back to what I was saying to the listeners, the viewers, like we all have those times of injustice and that thing that should not have that way, and maybe something fell apart in your life. And I remember like I was strategically planning on how to kill this guy when I got out. My friends already had his address. I was gonna hide outside his house, and I was gonna blow him away as soon as he came out. And one of the first times I ever heard God speak to me, and not to get religious here, but I heard this voice when I was in that cell, and it was like, "That will do nothing to honor your brother's memory. If you light the world on fire and you burn everything down, like that will do nothing to honor your brother's memory." Right? And so
Mhm.
I had a choice to make in that cell, and you got a choice, whatever it is that you're going through to make, that like this can be fuel that becomes a vehicle that pushes me forward, that actually empowers me, or it becomes a thing that just destroys my life. And we all had those things. Maybe it wasn't a loved one that was killed. Maybe it was something different. Maybe, like I said, it's a marriage falling apart or a business that fell apart, or maybe you lost money and you went through a time of financial struggle and like you're so angry, or maybe a friend betrayed you, right? And that can become the fuel that just burns your whole life up, or it can become the fuel that pushes you forward. And I made a decision, man. When I connected with God in prison, was like I refuse to allow my brother's memory to be dishonored, and this is going to become fuel. It's not going to become fire. And I didn't reach that point overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. You know what I mean? I, I was built for vengeance. Like my whole worldview was like, if someone does you this way, you have to get revenge, right? And
How did you come to that? Because like you said, you can go one way or the other with this, and I've seen people do both. How did you come to terms with that? Because if there are people, and there would be people listening and watching right now, who are in that decision mode where you just want to get vengeance, you just want to get them back. And, for good reason, like you've just said, there's good reason for it. But obviously, that's not, at the end of the day, that's not the best choice to make. How did you come to the fact where you made the best choice?
this is going to get very uncomfortable for somebody. Is I had to learn how to forgive.
Mm.
Now, again, I'm not telling you this just because I'm a pastor. Like I'm telling you this as someone who has walked horrific stuff that in my natural state, only like I do not want to forgive you. I want to exact judgment, whether it's the abuse as a child, the stuff that happened to my brother. But for me, I had to realize that like if I don't let this go, it's gonna eat me alive. And that again, walking around full of bitterness, they've done studies on this, scientific studies. If you walk around with bitterness and unforgiveness your whole life, you are at a much higher rate of getting sick and having some, not living a full life. It will literally scientifically and physically shorten your life, right? And so,
Mm.
for me, it was like, I'm not going to let this have power over my life. Are there days 20 years later that I still wake up that I'm angry? Of course there are. But every day I choose to say, you know what, God, hey, there's some things that I need forgiven of. I've done people wrong. There's times that I wasn't a good friend, that I wasn't faithful, that I didn't do X, Y, Z, right? And if you could forgive me, I gotta extend that. Does that mean I want to go hang out with the guy? Of course not. Of course not. Uh, does it mean you got to have boundaries and maybe some people you don't go around again? Of course not. But I couldn't move forward in allowing that to become fuel if I didn't forgive first. Because unforgiveness and bitterness, that's gasoline on the fire. Yeah. So for me, I had to forgive. I had to forgive. And if you don't forgive the people, the circumstances, if you don't let it go, it will rule your life. It will control your life, and it will be the reason why you fail instead of the reason why you succeed, right?
And
And
I
so
really, that is such a big, important point. And because I think it is easier to hold that grudge and unforgiveness to a large, it is easy to actually get to the point where no matter what somebody's done or what's happened to you, whether it was you or somebody else, to get to that point where you're big enough to forgive and let that go, that is a huge thing to overcome. And for people in that place, if you can get to that point right now, that'll be one of the biggest, best things you can ever do in life. And
yeah.
it will completely change the trajectory of your life from the time you do it. And like you said, it's not an instant thing. It doesn't happen instantly. It takes time to actually get to that point where you
Mhm.
can do it. And I look at you and I'm like, okay, you've come through what you've come through. You're stuck in prison for good reason.
Yeah.
Um, and yet all this happens to your family and people get off scot-free,
Mhm.
and you're like, "I'm gonna forgive you."
Yeah.
That's
I had not been sentenced yet either, so I still had that sentence hanging over my life. But
right.
and I want to say this too, and again, not to jump full fledged into religion, but I think the ability to forgive people is a supernatural gift. I don't think that within myself that I'm somehow holy and like I just have this amazing ability that I could forgive somebody of an atrocity like that. Like if it was up to me, I no. But I think for me, that's where again, I had to come to the end of myself. We work with a lot of people that are in addiction, coming out of drug abuse and alcoholism. And regardless of what you feel about God, a big part of AA and NA is realizing, yo, like I need something bigger than myself. And for me,
Mm.
I had to one, I had to receive forgiveness for myself. You know who the hardest person for me to forgive, Kingsley was? It wasn't that guy, it was
Patrick?
myself.
Mm.
If because we'll often treat other people, we'll treat our enemies better than we treat ourselves in our minds, don't we?
That's huge.
There's stuff that I would never say to an enemy that I say to myself every day, right?
Mm.
And so I had to, and again, I couldn't forgive myself. I had to reach out to something larger than me. And when I was able to do that and I was able to allow his forgiveness to heal my heart, then I was able to extend that to somebody else. And so, I was not in a church service when that happened. I was in a solitary confinement prison cell. There was no preacher. There was no Bible. There were minor chords and a smoke machine in the background. It was raw. It was raw. It was visceral. It was grimy. It was very intense. But it was no less real. And so that
I
became the
I
moment.
really want I really want people to grab that. That go deep inside of yourself and understand to forgive yourself, no matter what. No matter what's gone on, no matter what's happened, you have to do that because I don't think you can truly forgive other people until you actually forgive yourself as well.
Oh, you can't. You can't. I've yet to meet a person, and I've dealt with the most dangerous people in the state of Ohio that have committed crazy crimes. I've dealt with, people incarcerated in Australia, overseas, in the UK. I've yet to meet somebody who has truly extended forgiveness that has not first done that inner work themselves, right? Because you can't, there's a saying, you can't pour from an empty well. And if that thing's not
Mm.
real to you first, how can you possibly extend it to somebody else? You know?
What goes through, I'm gonna say, your mind, but also your heart, because that's the seed of it, really. What goes through your mind and your heart to actually forgive yourself?
I think for me, uh, it was realizing that nobody is all good or all bad,
Mm.
you know? And I've been told my whole life, even as a child, you're just this and you're going to be that. And you're going to end up like your dad and you're going to be dead or go to prison, which I did go to prison. And was almost killed several times. So I guess they were partially correct.
Pretty close.
Fuck. But yeah, I think for me, it's it's not something that I can muster up. I had to receive forgiveness myself. There's this ancient book. I won't say what it is. If you're clever, you can figure it out. But there was this ancient book that has this verse in it that says, those of you that have hearts of stone, I will take out your heart of stone and I will give you a heart of flesh. And like that is a perfect description of what my heart was like before that experience was I was a very
Mm.
hard-hearted person. I think that's a lot of people that have not opened themselves up to that. It's like, and it's not that you want to be that way. I didn't enjoy that. It wasn't worth it for me, but that was all
No.
that I knew. It was all that I knew.
Yeah.
And until grace crashed into my life, this tsunami of love that like, yo, I've seen everything that you've done. I know all the skeletons in your closet. I know all the evil stuff that you did that you didn't get arrested for, the crimes that you didn't confess. I see all those relationships that you had and the way that you abused your body and the way that you abused your body with drugs. And man, I still love you and I still see value. And not only do I love you, but I'm gonna demonstrate my love towards you, you know? And when I realized that, yo, that's how God thinks about me, bro. Like despite all that, it says that it's his goodness that leads us to, a new way of life, man. When we
Mm.
realize the goodness of God. And so yeah, man, I battled self-loathing, self-hate. It's something even as an adult I've had to work through. But I'll tell you what else has helped me too is therapy, bro. Is is realizing that it's okay to ask for help, you know? And, I was in a session not long ago, and we were talking about the inner child. I got I gotta send you this teaching. I've got a good teaching on this, and I talk about it
Love
in
it.
this message. I talk about in the message, if we believe that we have a soul, right? Our soul is eternal. It's not like our body. You know, we've all been to a funeral. We see that our loved one's body, and we know whether we can articulate it or not. All of them is not there in that casket, right? That something is
Mm.
left. And I talk about in this message how our soul is eternal. Right? And so, yes, our body ages. I was a 5-year-old kid. I was a 10-year-old kid, a 15-year-old. I'm a 25, I'm 46 now. Look at the gray, right?
And
But my soul is eternal and my soul never ages. And so I'm sitting and I talk about that in this message. But I'm talking to this therapist and he's like, man, you've got an inner child in you that's still in there, bro. Like, yeah, your body's gotten older, but that young Patrick that wasn't safe, like he's still in there. And so we're sitting in this session and he's like, I want you to close your eyes and I want you, if you could say anything to him, what would you say to him? And like at first, I didn't grow up with therapy, man. So I'm a little weirded out, you know. I don't know if I can eat this. He said, no, man, just relax. He's an amazing therapist. And he's like, I want you to speak to that child, think about that space that was dangerous, that you were afraid, that you were harmed. What would you say to that inner child? And I think the first thing that came out was like it's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. And bro, I just started like I could it was not rehearsed. I couldn't help like I'm tearing up thinking about it right now. Like these tears just came pouring out like, yo, you're safe, man. And then he encouraged me and prompted me to continue to talk to that inner child. And it went from that to like we made it. We survived. You survived all that. We're okay now. And like he had me hold my
wow.
heart, hand on my heart. And like it was powerful, man. It was feeling, bro. And so I think like, especially as men, you could be a successful entrepreneur that, makes a million, $2 million a year, but that inner child is still broken. And a lot of us as men, we grow up not thinking therapy is for us and that's for weak people. And we grow up, being told we should just bottle up our feelings and our emotions. And, how's that working for you? It didn't work for me at all. It made me violent and dangerous and criminal. And so once I found some healing, uh, yeah, I'm now a man of peace and I've got joy.
Mm.
And the war that I had to go through to find peace,
And there's so many people who are actually in that place, what you were talking about, where there is that inner child at the moment, and they look successful on the outside. They look like things are going well, and they are going well, but
Yep.
that's the outside. And the reality is they're not necessarily living a fulfilled life. They're not necessarily enjoying life. They might have the toys and the bits and the pieces and the house and the car and all that sort of thing, but is that real joy?
Yeah.
Is it real fulfillment? Is that really what you want? What success is to you? Because I've met a bunch of people and I don't really think that it is.
It's not. It's not. Yeah, same. Some of the work that I've done on the side, I've had construction businesses that employ people coming out of prison and stuff like that. One of the things that we did was we painted houses and some very, very expensive homes, multi-million-dollar homes. And it's not just to say it's true for everybody. I've met some extremely wealthy people that are very balanced and they have a sense of purpose and they have joy,
Absolutely.
generous, kind, wonderful people, selfless. And but yeah, there are a lot of them, and even a lot of just middle class people. They're just in the pursuit of more and more and more because we've all been lied to through our Western system. That man,
Yeah.
if I have this, that when I get that, then I'll be this. And if I can have this, and when that relationship comes, then I'll be happy. Yeah, I just it's just not true.
Mm.
I climbed that ladder and I've been up there, some of it criminally and some of it legally. And And without purpose, there ain't nothing at the top of that ladder. You know, I heard somebody say one time, you could climb the ladder of life and the ladder of success to find out at the end your ladder is leaning on the wrong wall, right?
Mm.
And so I think when we think about legacy, and you and I have talked about this, like, what if I were to take my last breath today, I would not want to be known just for what I've produced. I would, I want to be known for what I added to a room, what I've added to people's lives. I'll
Mhm.
never forget, you know, and I've been to funerals with I've been to funerals where babies, newborns were shot in a drive-by. I've been to funerals with overdoses, suicides. You know, the saddest funeral I've ever been to was none of those. It was a man that lived till he was like 90, 98 years old. And every person that came up to talk about this guy at his funeral, all they could say about him was, man, he was a hard worker. And like one after another, he never committed a crime, had never done anything bad. And there was, you know, I'm sure there was more than that, but like literally his own family, like one after another, his kids. And I'm thinking, man, if there was ever a picture of failure for me, like at the end of my life, it would be that. If that's all I'm known for is like, yo, I produced this amazing stuff, but like my kids, all they can say was I created stuff and I didn't add to their lives. Yeah, that stuff
Mate, I
is
think
really
you might have just pricked a few curly ones there with that statement, because
and I think
that's what a lot
we
of
both
people look at. Yeah, yeah, it's
well,
what a lot of people look at, and there's nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with it at all,
no,
but like I said, if that's all everyone knows about you, then it's pretty shallow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love nice stuff. I mean, I love fashion, I love clothes, I love nice cars, but yeah, at the end of the day, you know, it's like, you know, what am I gonna be remembered for?
Yeah,
I think for
and
me
it's
when
good
I
to be able to do all that.
it
It's good
is,
to be able to
well,
do that, have that, produce that, and be known for that. That's a good thing. I don't want people to get the wrong impression from what I'm saying here.
yeah, for
That's a
sure.
great thing, but there's gotta be more to it than
Mhm.
just that. A
Well,
lot more to it than just that.
I think to leave a legacy and to live with purpose is to live for something more than just yourself. So whatever it
Yeah.
is that you're building, whatever it is that you're creating, if it's a business, if it's, you know, if you're amassing wealth, you know, generational wealth, it's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. I grew up in poverty. Like, man, that's this. I would love to be able to create that for my children. But what am I? It, the question I ask myself with what anything that I create is how is this benefiting society? How is it
Mhm.
benefiting the world around me? And is it just self-serving? And it could be partially self-serving. Like this is self-serving to be on this podcast because I get to talk with my friend and like share my story. And there's a part of me that I love that. But if this isn't adding some life to somebody watching this, like all it is noise, you know?
Yeah.
I think it could be both. I think it could be both.
Absolutely.
When
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
creativity out there is like, yo, whatever it is that you're creating, building, you know, whatever your dreams are, whatever your vision board is, whatever your aspirations are, like they can benefit you and bless the world around you. And
100%.
I think that's where whatever it is that you're doing, if it's art, if it's music, if you're a construction worker, if you're an entrepreneur, if you own a Fortune 500 company, that's where you see those are the people that have peace. They have those things in common. It
Mm. Yeah, living with a purpose, it's beyond, like I said, it's beyond yourself. It's living with a purpose. There is an end game to this, on purpose. It also has fulfillment on the way through. Patrick, I want to go back to, obviously, you're in prison and you actually got out really, really early.
yeah,
Tell us how that happened and then
yeah.
what you did afterwards.
So, I did get out. I was facing 45 years. They were supposed to charge me as an adult, so transfer me to the adult court system, bound me over, and sentenced me. And that was a minimum sentence, by the way. That was not maximum. So the 45 years, this
Mm.
was not like, oh, you could. No, this was like, you're probably going to do this. And so the best explanation I could give for why I didn't is God intervened in my life. Like there's no other credit I could give. But so I go to the hearing where they're going to bound me over, and they say, "Is there anything that you want to say?" And so for the first time in my life, I stopped blaming people. And I want to encourage anybody watching this. Sometimes the problems in your life are not everybody else's fault. This isn't just criminals that do this. This is husbands, this is wives, this is business owners. Like, sometimes the problem is you, bro. Sometimes you are the issue. And I was a pathological liar up until that point. I was somebody who loved to blame everybody else, you know? And so, I had this encounter with God in my cell. I experienced forgiveness, experienced God. I forgive, the atrocity that happened. But I still had to face the music, And so, but I made a decision that morning, like, I'm not gonna go in there and I'm done lying. Like, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna own this. And so I go in and I tell the judge, I said, everything that you guys said I did do it. And whatever sentence that you give me, I deserve it. And I looked over at the victims, I apologized to them, and I said, I'm so sorry for what I put you through. And I said, Judge, whatever you think I deserve, like, I did this, and I'm sorry. And I accept whatever you sentence me to. And now, mind you, and I'm trying not to rabbit trail here too much, but I had already been previously incarcerated. I had escaped from a juvenile prison on an unrelated charge. Like, I had violated probation and parole 100 times before. I was not the good example of somebody to get a second chance. And this judge, her name was Judge Rubin. She was the strictest judge for those serious kind of violent crimes. And she looks over the bench and she says, Patrick, I don't know why I'm doing this, but we're going to keep you in the juvenile system, which was like, bro, my mind just blew because I knew what that meant. That meant I was 16. They could only keep me until I was 21. So I went from facing 45 years in prison to 4.5, which is just, it was mind blowing, And so, you know, obviously I'm free now. And, sometimes I'll be preaching or doing church stuff and people like, oh, well, where did you go to Bible college? And, prison for 4.5 years. Like, for real, that was my training ground. I got my education in there. I went to barber college. I learned some accounting stuff. I mean, I made up early in my mind in that sentence, like, if I'm going to lose this time, it's going to, this, hey, this is for somebody right here. This pain is going to pay me something. This suffering is going to pay me something. I'm not going to lose all this time and not gain something from it. One of the best teachers you can ever experience in your life is pain and suffering. I know that's not popular. It's not comfortable, but I'm telling you, I would not be the person that I am today without pain and suffering. Self-inflicted pain and
So
suffering.
true.
I own it. If it wasn't somebody else. And so, yeah, man, I get out, I get released. Well, I go to court, and part of my release was you can't go back to Cleveland. You got to go to Colorado, which is crazy because, again, my last experience with Colorado was abuse and just a family situation. But yeah, I had peace. God spoke to me, said, it's okay to go. Just go. I'm going to work it out for you. I didn't audibly hear this, but I had a sense of it, right? And so I went back. I went and lived with the same father who did all that stuff to me. And the first thing that they said when I walked in the door, he and my stepmom said, you're faking and you're just a criminal and you're going to end up back in prison. That was literally the welcome home after my brother 6-year-old. And I did these 4.5 years, didn't get in one single fight in 4.5 years, which that's a miracle if you knew the person that I was, I got my education. I had college education at that point. No welcome home. No, hey, hope you could do better this time. No, you're going to go back. And so, but
Nice encouragement.
this, and there's people out there watching this, that there's people that don't believe in you and people that think you're full of it and they think your dream is trash and like, there's no way you can do that. Nobody has ever done that. Don't listen to that stuff, man. Like, sometimes we're called to do something and we get to choose, are we going to believe what we've been called to do or what everybody else is saying? And I refuse to fall into it, man. And so my friend Aaron, who lived down the street, and Chris, they had obviously moved. They're adults now. Last time I was hanging out with them, I think we were getting high together. And so I look up Chris's number and I just figured out text him, hey man, I'm back in Colorado. And at this, he's in church, and he's like, yeah, I come check this church out, and him and his brother Aaron were part of this church, and man, I'll tell you, like, that place was so critical for me to rebuild my life. When you're going through a rebirth, sometimes not everybody sometimes not everybody can be in the room with you. If you've ever been in a room and you've had a child, not everybody is allowed to be in that labor room. And I was going through a new birth and I needed to be in the right environment, right? And so I was able to connect with this amazing church. That's where I met Kingsley. He was a youth pastor. And yeah, it's crazy, man. Now you got this big old gray beard.
Yeah,
Smiled off.
bit different now.
I'll tell you, guys, it was the kind of place that I could walk into despite my past, despite my experience, and I could be honest, I could be vulnerable and say, yo, I made some mistakes. I literally said that to Pastor Mark, like, I just got out of prison. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. But I love Jesus and I've had this transformation in my life. I don't want to sell drugs anymore, but I've never had a real job. Like just so raw, It's like I have no idea how to not be a womanizer, like just all the things. And they never judge me and they welcome me in and they just walk with me and to use a church word, they disciple me and help me figure out what it means to not live in chaos, man. And I was telling Kingsley when we did the pre-call, I think it was a couple weeks ago, like I would not be who I am, bro, without you. Like, I know years have
Mm.
passed and like you're back in Australia, I'm back in the States, but like the way that you treated me and my brother and like the love that you showed us, man, and like not all that religious nonsense, but just genuine compassion and empathy. Like, yo, I'll help you figure this out. I'll walk with you. I remember, I was doing hip hop music at the time and like, I remember telling the guys
I
about
loved
that.
it.
And so they're like, well, get up on the stage and do it, And I was thinking, the church, wrapped up along the church. And they didn't care. Well, they're Aussies, right? Aussie, 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 right? Aussies think a
Yeah.
little different than people in America. But like even just that simple gesture, like, oh man, like maybe I do have gifts. Maybe there is something inside me that can add
Mm.
good to the world. And so yeah, connected with that church, man, and that was so critical. Yeah, just those relationships, it was so critical because there's a lot of people, when you go through something traumatic and you're trying to rebuild your life, especially if you've gone through a divorce. Like if you were married for a length of time with that person, that was the only life that you knew, right? And when you're starting
Yes.
over and like, and maybe it's a failed business, maybe it was a career that you had that was wildly successful for whatever reason that thing blew up. Now you're struggling like, well, who am I? Where do I belong? Man, I just
Mm.
encourage you, you're going through a rebirth process and you got to have the right people in the delivery room with you. And I'm so thankful for you, bro. I'm so thankful that you guys were the ones. And because I don't think anybody else would have been equipped to handle me, to be honest.
You know what's funny? And I think I say this for a lot of people out there who just think they're living their life, but just living a life of you just
Mm.
generally care for people. Is that I look back at that and I cannot in any way take any credit for any of that because I didn't think I was doing anything. I was just living. Um, and yet it has
You know
a
what you
big
did though?
impact. And I
It's the
say
practice of presence.
no,
You
right.
didn't have to do anything. You were present in my life, bro, without judgment, without condemnation, without, keeping me at a distance. Yeah, yeah. You didn't have to. It wasn't any one specific thing. It was it was your presence. You know, there wasn't a single time, and that was a very
Mm.
jarring thing to go from being. And it was a high security prison I was in. We didn't go outside for 9 months before I got out. And so from going from that environment to getting on an airplane immediately upon release to coming to Colorado and stepping into a church, I'd never been in a church. And like there wasn't a single time that I walked into that building that I didn't feel welcome. Right. And so, man, you got the gift of hospitality, bro, and you got the gift of presence, and that is one of the most powerful forces on earth.
No, I want to encourage people then, um, after hearing that, just just to be there for people. And I think I know right now, particularly in business world and in other worlds as well, is that's probably one of the things that is missing. There's a lot of things about, hey, just are you okay day and check how people are going and that sort of thing. But it is just generally being there, just
Mhm.
generally be a friend. Pretty simple. There's not a lot to it when you think about it from what you just said.
I
That's
think
all
we
there is to it.
overcomplicate it.
And yet the difference, yeah, 100%. We really, really do. Because I look at, and I want you to take us down a little bit more of your story, because we're coming to where we're going to have to end up soon. But to what you've done, because like, hey, you've totally transformed what you've done into helping hundreds, probably thousands, I would say, of other people get their lives either A, find that they are worth something as human, but then helping them totally transform their life and actually have a great future as well. Take us down that track a little bit.
Yeah, so I found in my life that the my purpose was directly tied to the way in which I was wounded the most. It- That my purpose was directly connected to the thing that I was the most ashamed of, the most embarrassed of, the thing that hurt the most, right? And so after coming through all that stuff, I realized, man, I'm not the only person. It's not just people in prison. It's college students, it's business owners, it's young families, and pain is pain, suffering is suffering. And so, I've traveled sharing my story. We've started businesses, to help people that, when people get out of prison here in America, a lot of people don't want to hire them. They don't want to give them a job because of their criminal history. It's like, how can you expect somebody to change and build a new life if you're not willing to give them a chance? And so, because I received
Mhm.
a second chance, because I was welcomed in, I felt like I had an obligation to reach out to somebody else who was behind me who didn't have that opportunity. And so we would start businesses, coffee shops, construction companies that specifically only employed people coming out of prison, only employed people coming out of drug treatment. And we saw amazing transformation. We saw people, wives who you would never think in a million years would ever get sober, ever not go back to criminal behavior. They left that lifestyle. I think at one point we had over like an 87% success rate, which is unheard of here in America.
Wow.
There's one other organization that has one that high, and it's in Los Angeles. It's called Homeboy Industries, which we kind of modeled after. And but yeah, just sharing my story and going around doing music, preaching, and just anybody out there who feels unseen, who feels unworthy, like it, man. If there was a place for me, bro, watch the face. If there was hope for me, there's definitely hope for you.
The fact what you did there, I just got to, sorry to cut in, but I just have to say that that is not only um, a big thing to do for someone's life, but that is very brave where you set up businesses and all you did is employ people who nobody wants to look at. That, like, these are people everyone throws out, and you're like, "No, you're the only ones I want."
And you
That's
know what the interesting
huge.
thing part? You want the
It's huge.
interesting part about this is those are some of the most hardworking people I ever employed. It wasn't, and I was saying there
Mm.
were some people who didn't have criminal histories that were good employees, but man, you find somebody who's never had a
Sure.
chance, somebody who's never had somebody believe in them, and yes, we still vet them and we make sure they're ready and they're serious about moving in the right direction. But you find a man or a woman or a young kid coming out of the juvenile system that's never had a father figure or a mentor and has somebody believe in them. Like they'll be the most loyal, hardworking person you could ever imagine because they never had a chance.
Can you give us a couple of examples of a couple of people who you've helped like
Yeah.
that? Just tell us there, just briefly.
So this story is gonna make everybody cry. I'm gonna warn you. But yeah, there's so many of these. Cry in a good way. So there was this guy up in Cleveland. We call him Big Al. If you've ever seen the movie The Green Mile, that's what they called him in prison was the Green
Mm.
Mile. This guy was huge. He's like 6'9", 300 pounds of solid muscle. You know, completely institutionalized, and he had been in and out of prison for violent crime his whole life for decades. And I get a call one day from a church, like, yeah, we got this guy, he's scaring us, but, could you try to help him? We've heard about what you do. And I'm like, well, I don't have to fix it. I can't fix everybody. Like, I don't think I fix anybody. I think something bigger's happening, but I get to play in the sandbox, if you will, right? So sure, I'll meet the guy. And so I go to his house. He lives in this area called East Cleveland, which is, East Cleveland was one of the most dangerous communities in the United States at one point. I get to his house, I knock on his door, and the guy's so big when he comes out of the door, he has to like, bend down to get out of the doorway. Like he's huge. And so
Wow.
I'm like, hey, Patrick, the church reached out. I want to see if I can help you. And immediately this guy's like sizing me up, visual, like there's a prison stare that they got when they come home. And I know because I had it. And this he's standing way too close to me, like just very, very awkward, very intense. And I'm just smiling, I'm laughing, and just showing him like, bro, you're not gonna stare at me. Like I'm here to help you. Like you're not gonna push me away, right? And so I asked him, has he had a good meal since he's been out? He said, no, no, no. The guy's been out for 2 years and hasn't had a real meal. And so I
Whoa.
take him to a steakhouse, and we're sitting in the steakhouse, and they've got the football game above us. And I see him, he's sitting across from me, but I see him staring across the room like he wants to kill somebody. And he's shifting in his chair. It's probably, I don't know, 2 months after knowing him, we've been hanging out. And he's like, Pat, if this guy keeps staring at me, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. So I look behind me, and the guy's looking in his direction, but I look at where Al's sitting across from me, and there's a television above his head. The guy's watching the game. And so, I told the guy, I'm like, bro, what's up? And he's like, oh man. And it was like a little light bulb moment. Everybody's not out to get me. Well, a year goes,
Mm.
2 years go by. I'm not making any progress with this guy. He has two or three emotions: anger, suspicion, and violence. Like that is the emotional gauge that he lives on 24/7. Anger, suspicion, and violence. There's no in between. And so I'm praying, God, I've tried everything with this guy. I just can't break through to him. He seems so institutionalized. I took him grocery shopping one day, and mind you, he's been out for 2 years. He's buying the items that they only sell in prison in the grocery store. I'm like, bro, you don't
Wow.
buy this food? You're not in prison anymore. But mentally, he was still in a prison. So, man, I just didn't get anywhere with him. He's like trying to fight people off, and I'm in the middle of it, and I'm like trying to diffuse it. And so my friend, another Australian, Phil Evans, shout out to Pastor Phil. He's a pastor down in Sydney. He came to visit me in America. He brought a team of probably like 12 young adult Australian musicians. They came over to the United States for a mission trip, and we did a tour in the Ohio prison system where we just did concerts and shared our stories. It was amazing. And so they were with us for probably like a month. And so all the Aussies are staying at my house, and Big Al's there, and it's such a bizarre scene, right? And he's getting a kick out of their action, and but he's still so intense. And at one point, his phone rings. This is going somewhere. Stay with me. I'm almost to the end. All this is gonna make sense. And so his phone rings at the house when we're all hanging out, and so he goes outside. Well, I had to take my dog out to use the bathroom, and so I take the dog out. I'm trying not to pay attention to him. I'm not eavesdropping on this conversation, but the guy's so big, he can't whisper. And so I hear him say on the phone, he says on the phone, he's like, yeah, man, tomorrow's my birthday, but I don't care. I've never had a birthday. Now, mind you, this guy at this point is 35 years old. He, I hear him say on the phone, he's never had a birthday. He's never, in 35 years of life, he's never had somebody celebrate his existence once. Like, no wonder you're violent. No wonder you're lashing out. And so I go back into my homeboy, Phil.
Mm.
I'm like, Phil, I got an idea. I'm like, bro, this is crazy. I'm just warning you, if we do it, he may swing on us, but I've tried everything. Tried everything. This is what we're going to do. When he leaves tomorrow, we're going to go to the store, and we're going to get birthday hats, and we're going to get a cake, and we're going to put his face on it and his name on it. And I said, he has no idea. Any of us know, it's his birthday, but bro, I've tried everything else. Nothing's working. And so I invite Big Al back over. I'm saying, man, the Aussies are here. We're gonna have a barbecue. Come back. And so he comes back the next day, has no idea. We're sitting at the table, and I say, Big Al, I said, I'm getting ready to turn these lights off. I got a surprise for you. I said, like, please don't flip the table. Don't throw any of us out the window. Please. I said, I got a surprise for you. And he, again, he's very suspicious. What do you mean? What do you, I don't know, man. I don't know. You know? And I'm like, I promise you, just relax. And so you turn the lights out. The girls are in the kitchen. They got the cake, 35 candles, this dark room. This cake comes out of the kitchen, this glowing cake comes out of the kitchen, and all of us together start to sing, Happy birthday to you. And for the first time in this man's life, the world was as it should be. For the first time in his life, somebody saw him. And this angry, violent man starts to just weep and weep and weep. For 2.5 years, I never saw him show any emotion, and all that anger and all that rage began to fall off of his life. Why? Because somebody saw him for the first time. And later that night, we had a bonfire, and he still had his prison clothes and his prison ID. And I said, Miguel, we're going to throw that into the fire. I said, that may have been who you were, but I'm not who you are anymore. You are more than the worst thing that you've ever done. God's writing a new story for you, Big Al. And I can tell you that that guy has not been back to prison or harmed another person in over 10 years. He is the most gentle, kind man you would ever meet. I would trust him to babysit my 9-year-old daughter right now. And there's not many people I would trust to do that. But his life was completely I could tell you hundreds of those stories. And back to what you said earlier, we didn't do anything clever. We just showed up. We welcomed him in. And his life was transformed. And I was speaking. I
That's
was at
so cool.
in college here speaking about what we do. And one of the students said during the Q&A, Mr. Davis, how would you measure success? And Big Al sitting in the back of the room. And I said, well, I know this crazy guy that used to hit people with hammers. And he doesn't hit people with hammers anymore. And the students and the faculty, oh my gosh, and he knows I'm talking about him. He's the most gentle, beautiful soul you'd ever meet, man. And because somebody saw him. And I think all of us on a primal human level, that's what we all long for. We all long to be seen, be heard, and to be welcomed in there. There's no greater force on earth that can change the course of something than love, right? And so I may have changed
100%.
him, but he changed me
Absolutely,
too.
man. Oh, it always works that way. Every single time it works that way. You might go and do something for someone else, but and it's like when you raise your kids, like you think you're raising your kids, but when you're working with them as they're growing up, you're learning as much from them and gaining as much about what real love is because they're just pure and authentic. There's no masks there. So you learn how to be a real person sometimes from them just being them. Man, I thank you so much for your time, for your stories. And I just love like what life, the world dealt you early on that you've managed to turn around. I mean, we've got Big Al there. That's just one of hundreds of examples of people that you've worked with a changed life, that your business, your vocation, your everything you do and everything you're about now is about helping people who were where you were and transforming their lives as well. And there's not one person on this planet that can't do the same thing in their degree, in their way with that. And I mean, I so much appreciate your friendship over the years. I appreciate what you've done. I love your music. I'm not sure. Are you still doing any music at all? Or I haven't really seen anything.
I'm doing more preaching. I'll perform here and there, still a little bit, but not a whole lot. Yeah, mostly travel and speaking and stuff like that. But
yeah, but thank you so much for what you've inputted, and I know that the input, what you've said today, is going to have a massive, massive impact on people listening and watching this. I want you to, if you can sum up for us just real quick as we end, For someone to create the life they want and to leave a legacy they are proud of, what does that take?
Um, I think first you got to realize that your life before you do anything has worth and value. Before you ever produce anything, one of my favorite verses in all of Scripture is when John the Baptist is baptizing Jesus, and there's a God's voice comes down from heaven, and it says, "You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Now, if you're not familiar with religion, why does that speak to me? It speaks to me because it was said before Jesus did anything. It was before he did anything.
Mm.
And so you got to realize that you have worth and you have value. And like there is something like you could have been, the fact that you exist alone is a mathematical miracle that you're even here. Like you get to be here with this group of people during this time in the course of human history. Like your life is not an accident. And the fact that you've survived, that you've come through what you've come through, that that you've got to this point it's a miracle. There's people that got up this morning and got in their vehicle and they got a crash and they're no longer with us. And so, man, you got to realize your value, your worth. You got to realize that life is short. The most valuable place in the world, it's not a business, it's the cemetery. Why? Because all these people with all this potential and all these gifts, how many people go to their grave never using their gifts and their talents, right? And so we got a short window of time, and I would encourage you, man, know your worth, know your value, know the shortness and the brevity of life, and then find something that makes you feel alive. And how can you use that how can you use that for the good of the world, man? And for me, for the glory of God, right? For something bigger than myself. And so I think if you live your life, realize that you got worth, you got value, that life is short, that you've been given a gift it's a gift to exist. You know how I know that's true? Because there were several times I had people trying to blow my brains out, and I'm here. I'm still here. That little child, your little child is still there. Like you survived. You're here. You're alive. That's not for nothing. And so, man, this my epitaph, I wanted to say that guy rode that vehicle until the wheels fell off. You know, don't live your life with regret, man. Like you get one swing at this thing, and you were made. There's a purpose, and there's a purpose for your life, and it's way bigger than just you. It's for you, but it's bigger than you. And so, that's what I would say.
Mate, that is a perfect way to end the podcast. Thank you so much. And just thank you so
Thank you,
much.
brother.
I loved it.
Love you, man. Good seeing
Thanks,
you, bro.
Patrick.